Hi there, it's Gabrielle Nicolay from SpeechKids, reporting to you live from my car. And I wanted to keep talking about play today because it's so important for speech and language development. And so one of the things that came up actually this morning as I was seeing a lovely little person is playing with food. And so I'm going to use this as a proxy. I'm going to use playing with food as a proxy for many, many other things, but I just wanted to poke you a little bit, parents, because I think many, many times we have been taught, I know that I was, by my mother and father, not to play with your food, right? Food is for eating. You sit down, you eat it, you get it done, and you don't play with your food. And I'm all for that at meal times, but it turns out food is actually the perfect thing to play with, and here's why. Food is a thing that we experience with many, many different senses, right? And play is all about exploration and learning, right? We talked about play is the work of children, right? It's how they figure out what is going on in this world. And so food is a thing that they are, number one, interacting with frequently. Number two, that they are experiencing on many, many different levels, right? So they are experiencing food on a tactile level. They are touching the food. Food has a smell, and some smells are stronger than others. And some kids are more sensitive to smell than others. And I'm going to tell you a story in a little bit about a little person who's very sensitive to smell. They taste the food. Taste and smell are related, but not the same, yeah? And so there's all of these, then there's the sounds that food makes. If you crunch a carrot, it makes, first of all, it makes a sound inside your mouth, right? And it has a feeling inside your mouth, but it also makes a sound that you can hear sort of around the side, right? Externally. And so food is a what we call a multimodality experience, yeah? And so it's the perfect thing to play with. And the other reason is, especially for the twos and under, if you're playing with food, it can go in the mouth. And you're not going to worry about whether or not your child is mouthing things that they shouldn't be mouthing. Okay, so this morning I was playing with a buddy of mine, and this little person has some food sensitivities. And what I mean by that is doesn't like certain foods and stays away from whole categories of foods, and we're working on that. Okay, but here's what we're discovering as we work. And one of the things that I've done with this little person is to dial back the expectations on experiencing new foods. And so one of the things that I was having them do today was to smell the food. And that's literally all we were doing for several minutes, was just smelling how do different things smell? And then deciding, putting words with how those things smelled. And so this is where the link between play and food and speech and language development gets really interesting. And I'll take you through it for a second, because the first instinct of this little person was to say, that smells good, or it smells not good. And what we did throughout these 20 minutes that we were smelling, and we were smelling spices, and we were smelling a couple of different foods. And what we did was to put different words, other than just good and bad, around how things were smelling. And so that's the language development part of it, right? Is like, what does ginger smell like? Okay, I like the way it smells, fine, but that doesn't tell me anything about the quality of it. And so when we're doing the experiment, it was, okay, so how does ginger smell? We decided it was maybe a little bit spicy, maybe a little bit sweet, maybe a little bit dry. There are any number of directions you can go with this. My point being, an experience has words associated with it, right? And so this play experiment where we were smelling the food and then describing how it smelled is an opportunity for not only sort of food desensitization, but speech and language development. So the next thing, and this gets more into the play of it, was that we finger painted with a puree. And this is something I like to do with kids, just because I'm finding that kids are getting less and less messy. And so sometimes we just gotta like break the mess barrier. And some kids will go like up to their elbows, and some kids will just stay with their little finger, and they can barely get it into the puree or into the paint or whatever we're doing. But again, in this particular case, we're talking about playing with food. And so we squeezed a pouch, and I would only ever squeeze out a pouch. I would never put that in a